Today I'm talking about Deep Purple's Burn. It's one of the most important albums as they had a major lineup change. They got a new singer and a new bass player. They were two people who went on to become very famous in the rock and roll world. They also slightly changed their sound, so it's a very important album. I'll be talking about all of this history and all this stuff in this video. First, some general information. It was released on February 15th, 1974. It's the beginning of the Mark III lineup. The album has lots of great songs. There are 8 tracks, and as always, I will be showing you my vinyl first. I record that part separately, so let me do it first, then I will get to the story. Also, please excuse me as I am coming down with a cold, so I might sound a little stuffy. I probably should take a break after this for a few days, but anyway, here is the vinyl. Okay, let's take a look at the album cover, Deep Purple Burn. It's kind of an older album. It has the ring wear. I bought this one in Mexico, although this is the American version, I believe. So there's the front. Let me flip it over. So over here it has the side 1, the 4 songs, and the side 2, the 4 songs. And it has the new lineup where it says Glenn Hughes, bass, guitar, and vocals, and David Coverdale on vocals. There are 2 vocalists. I will be explaining that in more detail later on. All vocals are sung by David Coverdale and Glenn Hughes, except Mistreated, which is sung by David Coverdale alone. So they wanted to make a point of that on the album because that was pretty much a big deal as when they were joining the band. So, okay, over here it just has just a little blurb telling about when it was recorded. They went to Montreux, Switzerland. They had Martin Birch, and I'll be talking about all this anyway. So, the other side, it says the candles, copyright Candle Maker Supplies, and it's from London and in the art studio and all of that. And it has the road managers. I don't usually see road managers on an album cover, so that's pretty cool. Here's the record. It says, this is side 2. It has a pretty cool old Warner Brothers Records logo where it says Burbank, home of Warner Brothers Records, and has the palm trees. That's pretty cool. I remember these from back in the day. And here's side 1 where it has the first song, Burn, Might Just Take Your Life, all those, and the same sticker. So let's get to the video. Story begins with the Deep Purple and the Mark II lineup, which featured Ian Gillan on vocals, Roger Glover on bass, as well as Ritchie Blackmore on guitars, John Lord on keys, and Ian Pace on drums. This band was on the top of the world. They were very successful. They had a string of very good albums, such as In Rock, Fireball, Machine Head. But all this led to non-stop touring, so they were suffering from burnout and had lots of internal tensions. Ritchie Blackmore was unhappy with the band's musical direction. He thought they had become too poppy, and he wanted to return to a more blues-oriented or heavier approach. In addition, his relationship with Ian Gillan got very bad to the point they were barely speaking to each other. As a result, Ian Gillan decided to quit the band. He submitted his letter of resignation in late 1972 and early 1973 and said he would leave after the next tour. Apparently, he walked off the stage after the final show in Osaka, Japan in June 1973 without saying goodbye to the band and just decided to leave. But he wasn't the only one to leave, because shortly afterwards, Roger Glover was fired from the band, mostly because of Ritchie Blackmore, but he wanted a fresh start anyway. So now, Deep Purple only had 3 members in the band, who were Ritchie Blackmore, John Lord, and Ian Pace. They had to find 2 new members to complete the lineup. The first person they found was Glenn Hughes. He was somebody that Ritchie Blackmore and Ian Pace had already known about. He was the bassist and vocalist for the band Trapeze. He had a very powerful bluesy voice and had some funk influences. At first, he didn't want to join and just be a bass player because he considered himself to be more of a vocalist. But they offered him a deal saying that they would have 2 lead singers, and they were also considering Paul Rodgers from the band Free as co-lead vocalist. But Paul Rodgers decided to decline the offer, and he formed a different band, which is Bad Company, so they needed a new vocalist. Now it's time for our vocalist. They received hundreds of demo tapes from different people, but they decided to go with an unknown singer named David Coverdale. Keep in mind, this is long before Whitesnake or anything else he did. He was unknown at the time, but they liked his powerful blues-based voice, so despite his lack of professional experience, they gave him a chance, and he was the final piece of the puzzle to form the Mark III lineup. This lineup is very important because these 2 new members, their sound started to evolve. There was more funk and soul in the music and more bluesy vocals, plus the dual lead vocals that really defined the Mark III lineup. It's now time to record another album, which would be the first of the Mark III lineup. So before recording the album, the newly formed Mark III lineup spent 2 weeks in September of 1973 at Clearwell Castle in Gloucestershire, England. It was a way for the band to just live together, get to know each other, and start planning their material. They spent a lot of time writing and rehearsing songs. Ritchie Blackmore was very satisfied with how the new song sounded, and they tried to create songs that could be played in a live setting. The recording sessions went smoothly, despite the fact that David Coverdale really didn't have much experience working in the studio, but they laid down the tracks pretty quickly. They completed about one song per day. They used multi-track recording, and they ended up with different multi-track versions of songs such as Lay Down, Stay Down, Sail Away, Might Just Take Your Life, and A200. But one of the best parts about this band was that they had two lead vocalists. Unfortunately, that led to some creative conflicts, especially during the mixing. So for example, during the mixing of Mistreated, David Coverdale and Glenn Hughes recorded a dozen vocal tracks for the final chorus, but Ritchie Blackmore felt these backing vocals overlapped his guitar solo and had them largely muted in the final mix. This was something that David Coverdale was not happy with, but that was just one of the few problems they had during that time. Everyone contributed to this album. Many people say Ian Pace's drumming on tracks like Burn and You Fool No One were praised, and Glenn Hughes' bass guitar brought in this new funky sound as he used different effects as well as the slap bass technique. They also had a very good co-producer. They worked with Martin Birch, who was both the producer and the engineer for the album, so he had a lot of control over the sound and direction of the album. He also had a long history working with the band. He worked on all their albums since In Rock, so he was familiar with the band's sound and dynamics. Not only that, he was responsible for all the technical aspects of the recording, and he had a lot of creative input. He worked closely with the band's arrangements, song structure, and the sonic landscape of the album. He made sure that Ian Pace's drum levels were normalized in the mix, and that Ritchie Blackmore's guitar was prominent. One of the most important aspects of the album was that there were two new vocalists who were David Coverdale and Glenn Hughes. David Coverdale was considered to be the main vocalist on the album, but Glenn Hughes had some significant vocal parts, and he does lots of backing vocals as well. So let's talk about some of the songs. The most important one is the most popular one, and it's the title track, Burn. This one has both Coverdale and Hughes on vocals, where David Coverdale sings the main verses and the chorus, but Glenn Hughes also provides vocals on the chorus and does some harmonies. Not only that, it's a great example of hard rock in the 70s, or dare I say it, possibly influential on heavy metal, although some Deep Purple fans don't like when I say that word, heavy metal. But you have the guitar riff by Ritchie Blackmore and the awesome drumming by Ian Pace, not to mention John Lord's organ work. This also became a live staple for Deep Purple and has been played throughout their career, although I believe Ian Gillan doesn't ever sing it, but it's a very important song. Another important song is Mistreated, which is a David Coverdale song. It's a very emotional, bluesy type of track. It has Glenn Hughes doing some backing vocals, but as I said before, Ritchie Blackmore turned him down to make his guitar solo stand out. But I think this was one of the songs that really put David Coverdale on the map as a vocalist and showed the band's growing blues influences. Not only that, but the song has been played live, not only by the band, but also by David Coverdale's Whitesnake and even Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow. Then there's a song, Might Just Take Your Life. It's an example of a song with both vocalists. David Coverdale sang the verses and choruses, and Glenn Hughes added his harmonies. It's a catchy blues rock riff-driven song with a laid-back groove, and was also released as a single in some territories. Then there was Sail Away, which had both David Coverdale and Glenn Hughes. You can hear the difference with Glenn Hughes singing the higher parts. This is also an example of the band adapting their sound and moving into more of a funk and soul direction. Has a very prominent bass line, and it was something a little different for the band. It showed their willingness to experiment and move beyond just traditional hard rock. So that is all. Let me know, what are your thoughts on this album, Burn? Where would you rank it? Do you think it's a top 5? For me, this is a top 5 album. I think it's my favorite of the Mark III. And let me know all that stuff. I'm going to stick another video on the screen right here, so you can watch that next. And please give the video a like. It helps me with the YouTube algorithm. Please subscribe if you have not already. I do content related to physical media on this channel. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.